ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Namaste, my dear friends. This is second video on the nature of Atma. Video starts with He, the Hiranyagarbha, is the source of all kinds of knowledge, ethical, spiritual, physical, scientific, and social. The entire creation emerged from Hiranyagarbha at the beginning. Hiranyagarbha is in the form of an oval-shaped egg. Hiranyagarbha is the primary source of all living beings. It is Hiranyagarbha who endowed all these beings with the power of discriminating between the eternal and the ephemeral, between what should be sought and what should be renounced, between what ought to be done and what ought not to be done. What is the supreme knowledge that man needs to make his life purposeful? Hiranyagarbha offered to man the knowledge he needed for this purpose. This is the primary activity of Hiranyagarbha. Summing up in Swami's words, God Isvara is the aggregate of all individual jivas. Visvarupa, cosmic form, is that of all individual bodies, and Hiranyagarbha, cosmic mind, is that of all individual minds. The important principle here is that the whole is the sum of its parts. Little drops of water makes a mighty ocean. The water drop may be small and the ocean vast, but the ingredient is the same. The difference is in quantity and not in quality. Thus, qualitatively, there is no difference between the individual body and the cosmic universe. One is the part and the other is the whole. A similar relationship exists between the individual mind and the cosmic mind, as also the individual consciousness and the cosmic consciousness Isvara. Thus, truly speaking, there is no substantive difference between Vesvanara and Virata, between Tejasa and Hiranyagarbha, and between Prajna and Isvara, just as there is no difference in a certain sense between the wave and the ocean. Recall also table given earlier. To put it all in a slightly different manner, according to Vedanta, the individual is not merely the gross body he usually imagines himself to be, but a composite of three distinct bodies: the gross, the subtle, and the causal. Each body has its experiences in its own universe. The gross body in the gross world, Bhutakasha; the subtle body in the subtle world, Chitakasha; and the causal body in the causal world, Chidakasha. About these three bodies, Swami says, man can cognize the working of the world by understanding the nature of the gross body, the subtle body, the causal body, and the supercausal body. The gross body, which is inert in nature, is composed of elemental substances. The subtle body is Maya Savrupa, illusory form. In the dream state, the mind not only creates but also experiences pleasure and pain, fears and agitations. In the subtle body, these illusory creations of mind are Experience. These experiences are felt to be real only at the moment. Maya is that mental state in which the existent appears to be non existent and the non existent appears to be existent. All the experiences in the dream state are seen in the waking state as unreal. What is real and true must exist in the waking, the dream, and the deep sleep states. Truth is that which is unchanging at all times, past, present, and future. Hence, the subtle body is associated with Maya. The causal body is associated with the deep sleep state and is itself a derivative of the supercausal body, which is associated with the so-called fourth state presently to be discussed. As Swami points out, it is as a reflection of the Supreme One that the three bodies function. It is also worth appreciating that the subtle body is far more powerful than the gross body, not in terms of raw animal power, but in terms of creativity. For example, whereas the ordinary body is subject to space and time, the subtle body transcends both these since the mind creates its own space as well as time. This is a remarkable capability of the mind in this particular state, a capability whose significance has been grasped only by Vedantins. The mind in the dream state becomes very powerful because, because it is the microcosm of Hiranyagarbha. There is a deep and profound reason for the existence of this hierarchy of universes and bodies. As Swami has explained, they essentially provide a staircase for cosmic energy to come down step by step to the gross world and to the individual Bhagwan acts. Every force can work only through some medium or the other, which is physical. The same power that operates the gross body works through the subtle process of thought. They, the gross and the subtle bodies, are not two different entities. One is the subtle form of the other, that's all. Thus, as Swami often emphasizes, the Atma or the Brahma is the ultimate basis. It is the basis for everything that one perceives or experiences in the physical universe. However, it is incredibly subtle. Below it in the hierarchy discussed above is Isvara, following which is the slightly less subtle world of the cosmic mind, of which the individual mind forms a part. Last comes the physical world, with which most of us are totally preoccupied, which is very visible and can be experienced by the senses. Every individual is a part of the gross world. Mistakenly, we take the physical world to be the only reality, but in truth, there is a higher, though more subtle reality, namely the Atma Brahma, which is also the basis for everything. The human's purpose in life is to recognize this fundamental reality and to feel one with it. The fourth state, Turiya. What about the fourth quarter that Mandukya talks about? This state which really subsumes all the others even as Om subsumes. Om is referred to as Turiya, though often translated as the fourth state. Experts point out that the Turiya is not a state at all, rather it is very existent, very existence itself, which takes on the appearances of the various states earlier described and catalogued as states, as says Ramana puts it. Pure consciousness is the only reality. Consciousness plus waking we call the waking state. Consciousness plus dream we call the dream state. Consciousness plus deep sleep we call the deep sleep or dreamless state, because by long habit we have been regarding these states as real. We call the state of pure awareness the fourth or Turiya. There is, however, no fourth but only one state. Suppose one were to ask, who am I? Bhagwan Baba says, the Vedantic answer would be, I am not the one experiencing the waking state, nor am I the one experiencing the dream state, nor am I the one asleep in the deep sleep state. I transcend all these. I am the transcendental reality itself, or what Ramana refers to as pure consciousness. The Turiya Avastha is the highest state of consciousness in which the essential nature of the Atma is experienced. The Turiya Avastha is a pure, tranquil and steady state of superconsciousness in which all discriminating and differentiating gunas are transcended and dissolved in the eternal and absolute reality of Brahma. In brief, Turiya is Atma or Brahma, for both mean the same. It provides the connecting link between not only the three universes, the gross Bhutakasa, the subtle Chitakasa, and the causal Chidakasa, but also between the states of experience of an individual. It is, as Swami puts it, like the string that passes through a garland of beads and is the same whether one considers the macro or the microcosm. Incidentally, seen in this light, Brahma transcends even Ishvara, defined earlier as the presiding agency of the causal world. Recall table 1, and this precisely is what Krishna tells Arjuna in Sloka 8, 8th chapter, Sloka 20 of the Gita. Caution: the term Isvara is sometimes used synonymously with Brahma. Such usage is avoided here. Others choose to refer to Brahma as the Supreme Isvara or Parameshwara. Samadhi. This brings us next to what is often described as the Samadhi state. A Vedantin would describe this as a state in which a person transcends the limitations of the mind and ascends to a plane of consciousness higher than thought itself. All this might sound to be a set of fancy words, yet the Samadhi experience is very genuine and great yogis have experienced it. Perhaps Vivekananda's graphic description of it might give some idea of the experience. He says, One day in the temple garden at Dakshineswar, Sri Ramakrishna Vivekananda's master touched me over the heart, and first of all I began to see the houses, rooms, doors, windows, verandas, the trees, the sun, the moon, all were flying off, shattering to pieces as it were, reduced to atoms and molecules, and ultimately became merged in the Akasha sky. Gradually again the Akasha also vanished, and after that my consciousness of these, what happened next I do not recollect. I was at first frightened. Coming back from that state again, I began to see the houses, doors, windows, verandas, and other things. On another occasion, I had exactly the same relationship by the side of a lake in America. Vivekananda had this trance like experience when he was not yet advanced as a yogi. The experience having been given to him by his guru just so that he would get a brief taste of a state where sheer oneness prevails. Apparently, people not particularly noted for their spirituality, but perhaps with a spiritual streak in them, have also had similar experiences. The poet Lord Tennyson describes his experience as follows: a kind of waking trance I have frequently had quite from boyhood when I have been all alone. This has generally come upon me through repeating my own name 2 or 3 times to myself silently till all at once, as it were out of the intensity of consciousness of individuality. The individuality itself seemed to dissolve and fade away into boundless being, and this not a confused state, but the clearest of the clearest, the surest of the surest, the weirdest of the weirdest, utterly beyond words, where death was an almost laughable impossibility, the loss of personality, if it were so, seeming no extinction. I am ashamed of my feeble description. Have I not said the state is utterly beyond words? The popular notion is that the samadhi state is connected with a trance like experience such as Ramana Maharshi and Ramakrishna Paramahansa often experienced. Since during a trance the physical body is still and appears inert, people used to refer to Ramakrishna as the man who died 5 or 6 times a day. Swami has pointed out that this is a totally wrong interpretation of the word. It is true that in the trance there is a wonderful and indescribable oneness. However, the trance is also a fleeting experience. According to Swami, one does not have to be in a trance to experience bliss. One can be wide awake and still be in the samadhi, a state which sometimes is spoken of as waking sleep. In fact, as Swami stresses, one who is fully evolved goes through life itself in a samadhi state, whether he is awake and engaged in work or sleeping, because This person experiences nothing but bliss all the time. How is that possible? Because he sees only oneness, because he dwells in that state where there is no differentiation, and because that state is bliss itself. Clearly, such an experience would be totally beyond the comprehension of ordinary mortals, which is why such people, who incidentally are none other than the Siddha Prajnas Krishna talks about in chapter 2 of the Gita, are regarded as strange beings. Swami enlightens us further with the observation that Samadhi is the state in which dhyana meditation attains fulfillment. In this state, the individual rises beyond the objective world of relative reality, the subjective identity of himself, and even that very activity that he is engaged in dhyana. Samadhi is not a state of unconsciousness, neither does it mean frisking about in emotional excitement. The word samadhi itself is indicative of its significance. Sama is equipoise, dhi is intelligence. Samadhi is that state of intellectual equipoise where the individual transcends the world of duality and experiences the bliss of divine communion. Elsewhere he adds, Samadhi means thinking with equal mindedness. To be equal minded in cold or heat, in profit and loss, in praise or censure, that is Samadhi. Therefore, a person who is immersed in Samadhi, whose mind is in equanimity, will always be in state of bliss, whether he is in the bhutakasa, the waking state, in the chitakasa, the dream state, or the chidakasa, the deep sleep state. Going by Krishna's definition, we can say that a Siddha Prajna, or a person with perfect equanimity, would be always in a state of samadhi. The Jivatma and the Paramatma. The word Atma is often used with various prefixes leading to words such as Asjivatma, Mahatma, and even Duratma. And besides all these, there is also the word Paramatma. Such proliferation naturally leads to some confusion, especially when it is said that the Atma is really one. Some clarifications are therefore called for. Consider a person sailing from, say, Hawaii to the West Indies by the western route, that is, he goes first through the Pacific, then through the Indian Ocean, and past Sri Lanka and South Africa, and finally via the Atlantic to the destination. It is one continuous waterways from start to finish, and yet different names are given to different stretches of water encountered en route. Next, consider an empty pot placed on the ground with its mouth facing the sky. There is space inside the pot as well as above it, in fact, stretching all the way to the end of the universe, and yet one often talks of the space inside the pot as if it were distinct from the that outside it. The important point brought out by the above illustrations is that although the entity, water or space, as the case may be, is itself single and extended, for convenience it is compartmentalized and identified as different segments. Depending on one's perspective, one can either look upon the entity as just one single or as made up of distinct segments. These examples have a direct bearing on the situation with respect to the Atma. Paramatma or Brahma is like the wide expanse of water or better space which pervades everywhere, while Jivatma is a portion of it, just as a portion of the body of water is called the Indian Ocean or Atlantic Ocean, or a portion of space is called the pot space. Thus it is that Krishna tells Arjuna, the eternal Jivatma in the human body is but a part of my own being, and it is that alone which draws round itself the mind and the senses, both of which are rooted in Prakriti. Gita chapter 15, stanza number 7. A question that immediately arises in this context is, just as space is trapped to some extent by a pot, what is it that partially traps the all-pervasive Atma? The answer is that it is the subtle body which does so, and it is this trapped portion of the infinite Atma which is often referred to as the Jivatma. Qualitatively, there is no difference between the Jivatma and the Paramatma, but the difference is that the Jivatma is embodied or trapped. If Paramatma is a witness, as Krishna tells Arjuna, then so is the Jivatma. Only the Paramatma is a witness to the entire universe, whereas the Jivatma is a witness to the experiences of the body in which it is located. Swami elucidates further. Who is a Jiva? Jiva is a God. The Jiva, the individual self, resides in a body. The Jivatma and the divine principle Paramatma are not two distinct and separate entities. The next question which arises is, what does this Jiva do? Residing in the body? The answer is, the Jiva acts merely as a witness, besides, of course, supplying energy. To understand this statement, one must first appreciate that appreciate that the Jivatma is of the same nature as the Paramatma. The latter is the ultimate source of cosmic energy which animates the universe, and as far as the body is concerned, the vital forces which animate the body derive their energy from the Jivatma. The question of the vital forces and the role they play is a bit involved and requires some explanation. Let us first accept that there are certain vital forces which make the body alive. Where do they get their energy from? From the Jiva. To understand that better, consider a steam engine. The engine functions because of steam, but to produce steam one needs fire. Thus, fire, which is primary, is like the jiva, and steam is like the vital force. Swami uses an electrical analogy, often comparing the ultimate source of energy to electricity. Bulbs are many, but the current is one, is a favorite expression of his. Seen in this light, the so called vital forces, vital though they are to the body, exist and operate entirely on account of the Atma. Just as the fire in the steam engine produces heat and leaves all the rest to the steam and the mechanical machinery, so also the jiva triggers the vital forces which in turn make the body engage in action. Thus, like the fire in the steam engine, the jiva is not directly involved, being as both Krishna and Swami declare a mere witness. How does this Atmakam vital force combination actually operate in practice? To understand this, let us examine what one actually means when one says I see or I hear. Swami explains sight as follows. Take for example the power of sight. You think it is the eyes that see? No. The eye is inert matter. Who is who is it that sees? The seer is the Atma. Consider the ears. People are listening to a broadcast from the loudspeakers. They may consider the loudspeakers as the source of sounds they hear. But if there is no current, the loudspeakers will be silent. The current is the basic factor. The ears are like a loudspeaker. It is because of the current of the Atma that the ears are able to hear. Hence, for the functioning of all the sense organs, the Atma is basic. To the scientifically minded, it might seem far-fetched to assert that it is the Atma which illumines the eyes, for example. This is not so unreasonable as it might sound. One has to merely compare the eyes of a living person with that of a corpse. None can deny that the eyes of a living person shine in some inexplicable manner. They have a glitter and can convey pain as well as joy. How is it that the eyes become alive? Vedanta says it is on account of the Atma. It is not just the sense organs alone, but even the intellect which is illumined by the Atma. Swami explains, but from where does the intellect get its power? The intellect is shining on account of the Atma. The ultimate source that illuminates everything is the Atma. It is the main switch. To stress that everything is illumined and energized by the Atma alone, Swami further adds, in the absence of Atmic power, which enables all the organs or tools to function, the body becomes a worthless mass of flesh and bones. And he continues, we need not carry a lamp to see a burning lamp, for the burning lamp can be seen by its own light. When the self shines in all its splendor by its own light in everyone, we do not need any other light of knowledge to see the self. It is not possible to see the light of the Atma even by the light of the intellect Buddhi, since Buddhi itself derives its light from the self. Intellect is like the bulb and the self is like electricity. It is the light of the Atma that shines through the senses and the organs of the body. One might at this stage like to know more about the trapping. Without going into the details, one may roughly visualize the living being as living being equals gross body plus subtle body plus Atma. The gross body is easy to understand, being the biological entity consisting of the various organs. The subtle body, on the other hand, is a more difficult concept since we cannot see it directly. It consists, among other things, of the mind and the oft mentioned vital forces, the five pranas. The Atma, it must be remembered, is subtler than even the subtle body. The subtle body derives energy from the trapped Atma, and in turn, the vital forces cause the gross body to perform various functions. The term soul, which is often used, is nothing but the Atma plus subtle body combination. It is because the Atma, or rather a portion of it, gets caught up with subtle body, one often refers to the portion of the Atma in the body as the embodied one. It is the same as the self or jiva. Figure 4. What we normally refer to as the body corresponds to the physical or the gross body, sthula sarira, which is describable by physics, chemistry, and biology. But the body also lives and has feelings and emotions which science is unable to explain. Vedanta deals with these imponderables by invoking the concept of the subtle body. Sukshma Srira. To use the language of science, the subtle body is an energy field and exists like an invisible aura enveloping the body. Does it have any specific shape or form? We do not know. Some feel that the spinal column, which is believed to be the pathway for the spiritual force, Kundalini Shakti, actually pertains to the subtle body and not the physical body. This makes sense, especially since both physical examination as well as the X-ray examination of the spine of the gross body does not reveal such pathways. Figure 4 offers a schematic showing the subtle body in juxtaposition to the physical body. Incidentally, the so-called liberation of the soul is nothing but the permanent rupture of the bond between the Atma and the subtle body. More would be said about it shortly. An interesting financial analogy can be given to explain the difference between the Paramatma and the Jivatma. Suppose a person has $1,000 in a bank. The bank does not physically keep a bundle of currency notes worth a total of $1,000 in a particular place to indicate that there are $1,000 in the account. The deposit is recorded merely as a number in some ledger or stored as an electronic signal in a computer. In other words, the money is present in an intangible form, so to speak. Suppose the person draws $100 from his account, say in the form of $1 bills. The dollar bills represent money, and so does the entry in the account. The dollar bill, however, is of small denomination, whereas the money in the deposit is much more. Further, the money in the account is inert, whereas the dollar bill can be directly used for cash transactions. For cash transactions, the Jivatma is like the dollar bill. It is, as Krishna says, a small particle of the Paramatma. But unlike the bank account, which diminishes when a withdrawal is made, the Paramatma, being infinite, can never be depleted. Further, just as the currency is suitable for cash dealings, the Jivatma is in a form suitable for contributing to the action in nature or Prakriti. On conscience and consciousness, two words often used by Swami, namely conscience and consciousness, can be understood on the basis of the above discussion, as Swami himself puts it. Brahma, Paramatma, refers to the universal consciousness that is present in all beings. The consciousness that is present in the individual body is called Jiva Atma. It is called conscience. The distinction between conscience and universal consciousness should be noted. Conscience is a reflection of the universal consciousness. When the conscience or the Atma ultimately leaves the body, it merges in the universal consciousness and becomes one with it. The process may be likened to the oneness that occurs when the air within a balloon joins the atmosphere air outside, which occurs when the balloon bursts. The individual self is the Jivatma. The universal self is the Paramatma. The individual self confined within a body is like air confined within a balloon. When the individual self sheds its attachments relating to the body and develops universal love, it overcomes the confines of the body. It merges in the vast infinite love. This merger is described as mukti, moksha, or liberation. So there it is. Swami not only gives us a very clear description of the relationship between the individual conscience and the universal consciousness, but also a graphic picture of liberation. We thus see that our inner conscience, which are so used to ignoring, is nothing other than the voice of Swami, the voice of Paramatma, the voice of Brahma, the voice of God Almighty. Death, rebirth, and liberation. Swami has no doubt explained liberation, but what about death? This too is easily understood with the help of the equation given earlier, namely living entity equals gross body plus subtle body plus Atma. Death occurs when the subtle body withdraws, meaning essentially the withdrawal of the vital forces or the pranas, which is why death is often described in India as the going away of the prana. Swami sheds further light in the Sandeha Vahini, from which an extract follows. Bhakta, you said, Swami, that in everything there is Atma. Is there Atma in a dead man? Swami, a good question indeed. Well, it is only when you have awakened from deep sleep or sushupti that you are aware there is an I. Is it not? In the same manner, there is Atma in the corpse also. Bhakta, then how can it be called dead? How can death happen when there is Atma? Swami, death means the fading out of the I consciousness. Rebirth happens when I consciousness comes again. This is what is called birth and death, my boy. Ahankara ego is born, Ahankara dies, that's all. At first sight, this dialogue may be puzzling, but but drawing upon what Swami has said elsewhere, the meaning becomes clear. The word Ahankara stands for ego or body consciousness and is derived from the word Aham, which means I. The supreme I, that is, this I and the Atma are indistinguishable. When the Atma becomes associated to a body that is becomes embodied, the subtle body gets energized. As a result of this association, the mind, which is a part of the subtle body, gets to know about the I and promptly hijacks the am feeling or the feeling of I, converting it to ahankara or the I feeling. One sometimes say that ahankara converts beingness into being. It is like the servant who begins to act like the master. As Swami has explained on many occasions, Ahankara, thus born, is nothing but the famous ego. In short, we say a person is alive when the life force activates the I consciousness in him. This life force and the I consciousness are associated with the subtle body. On death, the subtle body and the I consciousness are associated with the subtle body. On death, the subtle body transfers to a new gross body. The latter then becomes energized, that is, alive, while the former becomes inactive, that is, dead. The I feeling now transfers to the new body. Regarding the subtle body, Swami says, a person can discard as many gross bodies in which he takes residence as the number of times he pares his nails, but the subtle body cannot be changed, it lasts and persists. One might still wonder about the presence of the Atma in the dead body. This remark could be understood with the help of the following example. Let us regard the sky as the analog of the Atma. It is everywhere and exists by itself. Now, in the sky, there appears a cloud occupying some space which is obligingly provided by the sky, no cloud. Suppose the cloud moves away to another spot. When it moves, the cloud does not carry the sky with it. It does not have to, for the sky is everywhere and the sky continues to be present also in the spot previously occupied by the cloud. In short, even though the cloud moves, space remains static and continues as before. The subtle body is like the cloud, whereas the Atma is like space, and thus it is that one says that Atma continues to be present in the corpse. In fact, the Atma is everywhere, inside even the atom. In this respect, it is like the imponderable ether which physicists had invented in the 19th century to explain the propagation of light. To continue with the issue of death, we first note that although the Atma is the primary source of life energy, or for that matter, any type of energy, it is the subtle body which captures this energy and transmits it to the various organs for them to function biologically. The subtle body is thus like a bulb. To produce light, one needs both electricity as well as a bulb. The Atma is like electricity and is available everywhere, but visible light is produced only where there is a bulb and has been plugged in. When a person dies, the subtle body cuts loose from the physical body and looks for a new accommodation or gross body. See also figure 5. And when it settles down there, it promptly gives life to that new body. Now, the subtle body can operate only if there is energy available for it. Its energy source is the Atma, which, however, is omnipresent. Thus, when the subtle body arrives at a new location, it has no problem with electric supply, as Swami puts it, because the place is already wired up. See also Gita chapter 15, stanza number 8. Figure 5. The subtle body referred to in the previous figure is not visible to the eye. When a person dies, his subtle body, inclusive of the trapped Atma, decouples from the gross body and floats away. Of course, this cannot be seen since the entity escaping is subtle and beyond the senses. After the lapse of a suitable interval of time, the subtle body now seeks association with a new infant body, and thus it is that the person is reborn, as schematically illustrated above. Krishna makes a brief reference to this in Sloka chapter 15, Shloka number 8 of the Gita. In summary, both during deep sleep as well as in death, the ego is absent. In one case, it is temporarily dissolved, and in the other, it takes flight. Which is why a philosopher regards death as a long sleep accompanied by a change of dress on waking up. The recipe for escaping from the cycle of birth and death should now be clear. The bond between the Atma and the subtle body must be broken, and the key to this is the permanent dissolution of the ego. Ultimately, all the various paths and spiritual exercises or sadhanas prescribed boil down to just this: destroying the ego and breaking the bond. And when this bond between the Atma and the subtle body is broken, one is said to be liberated. For the bond to be broken, one must, as Krishna says, essentially conquer the mind self with the self. Once the conquest is successful, therefore, one just waits out till the body dies. This time, however, there is no subtle body to keep the Atma trapped as before, and it is all over. The balloon bursts and the trapped air merges forever with the atmosphere outside. Swami often stresses that the human form is given so that one may use the opportunity to cut loose forever. As he puts it, you are born so that you may not be born again. You die so that you may not die again. The T-Sodi mind Atma complex. The body, the mind, and the Atma together form a powerful trinity. This combination is the same for all, but what the person actually is depends upon how this combination functions in practice. The person could, as Swami says, be like an animal, be human, be demonic, or be divine. He further observes, when we speak of man, we should consider him as the combination of the body, the mind, and the spirit, Atma. The body is an instrument for performing actions. Mind is the faculty which determines what is right or wrong. The Atma, spirit, is that which is ever pure, unchanging, and permanent. Man implies three things: doing, knowing, and being. It is when the body, the mind, and the Atma are present in union with a human being can be said to exist. When the body alone acts without regard to the mind and the Atma, that person is said to be in the animal state. When the mind alone acts in association with the body without regard to the Atma, that condition is described as demonic. What about achieving the divine state? For that, Swami says one must be installed in the Atmic principle, transcending the body and the mind. If examples are needed for understanding that statement, those of the sages Ramana and Ramakrishna should suffice. So at this stage I conclude this video. Third video on the nature of Atma will start with the topic reality, Maya and all that. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.